Welcome to the tour of your sewing machine. The point of learning all of the parts of the machine is not just to get a good grade, but it's to help you become more independent. So when I tell you to bring up your take-up lever using your hand wheel, you know what that means. And it can help you solve your own problems faster. So I'm going to start on the side of the machine. Down here you can see that you've got two cords coming out. There's also your on-off switch, so your power switch is right there. This switch or this cord goes to your foot pedal. Make sure that's plugged in all the way. If it's not, your pedal won't work when you compress it. And this switch right here is your power switch. Clearly it turned off the machine when I unplugged it. So if your machine doesn't turn on right away, make sure you check this as it fits right here and in the wall as well, or the outlet. Up here on the side of the machine is called your hand wheel. When I turn the hand wheel towards me, you can see my needle goes up and down. You use that to control small movements as you stitch. Now you can see our info display, which is right here. You can see all of the different stitches that I've chosen and all of the different defaults as it is right now. I'll show you at the top first. This is the stitch length control. This decides how long your stitches are going to be. If you have teeny tiny stitches, that's going to be really, really strong, but hard to seam rip. And if you have really long stitches, it's not going to be as hard to seam rip, but it will be easier to pull apart. So you will be using this button a lot as you bump your stitches all the way up to 5 or 6. I think on this machine goes to 6. That means you're going to have very wide stitches. That's called a basting stitch, and you'll use that a lot as a temporary stitch, kind of like pinning something together. This is called your stitch width, which decides how wide your stitches are going to be if you choose something that goes down here that's got a zigzag to it. If you're working with knit fabric like the t-shirts that you're probably wearing right now, you might use the stitch 2 through 7. So you choose that by bumping up the number here. So let's say I wanted to choose number 7. I'll just compress the ones button right here until that says 7, and then I'm ready to go. This button right here is your back stitch. This means that instead of pushing your fabric forward, it's going to push your fabric backwards. So you'll be stitching over where you just stitched. The point of that is to anchor in your thread so that you don't have to tie it by hand. So sometimes I say reverse stitch, sometimes I say back stitch. It doesn't matter. This guy right here is your guide to seam allowances. You'll learn more about those, but I want you to see that this exists here so you don't have to constantly check your notes when I say, hey, what seam allowance are you using? Is it a 1/2 inch? Is it a 5/8 inch? You can cheat and look right here. When you open up the lid, you're going to see a black spindle right here. When I compress this down and push on my pedal, it might take a little bit to warm up. That moves. I know you can't really see it in the video, but notice my needle isn't moving. That's a way that we use to wind our bobbin, which means we're putting thread, that's kind of messy, but we're putting thread on our bobbin. I've got thread right now on my spool pin, but I'm going to take it off to show you. So this is my spool pin where my spool of thread goes. I've got a large and a small spool cap. You might reverse them if you are working with a small spool rather than a large one like this. Those hold the thread in place. Everything right here is referred to as your thread guides. It's essentially a crevice where your thread will go, and there are arrows to tell you how to thread the machine, but you'll learn that in the next video. This right here is your thread tension. That refers to how loose or how tight your thread is. So if you are sewing something and it looks really loopy and ugly, you might want to check that. Make sure that it's the right tension. We use different tensions for different types of fabric. This right here is called your take-up lever. I want you to notice when I push down on my pedal that the take-up lever, takes a little while to warm up here, take-up lever goes up and down, up and down. What it's doing is it's taking thread from the spool and pulling it down to the needle. So it's very important that that is threaded correctly. This right here is your presser foot pressure. So this is your pressure foot. I'll explain that to you in just a second. Your presser foot can go up or down like this. Essentially, it presses down the fabric to your feed dogs, which I'll explain in a second. if I put my presser foot pressure really low, or like to number 1, there's no weight to it at all. It's really loose. If I go all the way to 9 like this, it's really tight. And we would use different types of pressure for different types of fabric. If all else fails, just turn the dial to 4 for both of them and you should be good. So here's your presser foot right here. Back behind is the presser foot lifter. I want to show you that from here. That's the presser foot lifter. My preference is that you use the inside of the machine like this, the outside of the machine like this, to bring it up or down, not over the top, because that's really easy to accidentally miss it, and make that awful noise. So we want to avoid that as much as possible. The presser foot presses down on the feed dogs down here. The feed dogs move back and forth. It's kind of hard to see, but there they go, up and down. When I put my fabric in, I'm going to turn it off and turn it back on again. When I put my fabric in, you'll see once it gets started that without my hands touching it, the machine is able to go and pull the fabric for me. That's what the feed dogs do. Right next to the feed dogs is something called your needle plate. I'm going to take it out to show you. On the needle plate are different measurements, and those refer to your seam allowance. And so you'll need to know that if I said I need you to do a 1/2 inch seam allowance, you know that's between the 10 and the 15. So you'll need to know that for the seam allowance. Down here is your bobbin full of thread, and that goes in the bobbin case, and this is your bobbin cover. The bobbin cover just slides off like this. You push down and slide towards you, and it comes right off. I believe that's all of the functions of your sewing machine that you need to know. Good luck on the test.